Alrighty. Good evening, team. So this is week 7 of the multimedia discussion. This is of ethics, compliance, and value-based training in the Department of Health and Human Services for MPA 580, Legal and Ethical Issues of the Public Sector by Eric Sandoval. And today's the 25th of April. So let's go ahead and dive into our brief overview. So our brief overview is the purpose of this study is to analyze ethics and compliance in health and human services, such as the HHS operations. We're going to examine value-based training and shaping ethical behavior and also apply ethical theories to public health decisions. So essentially, today we'll be diving into how ethics, compliance, and value-based training function with the Department of Health and Human Services. And essentially, I'll connect key ethical theories to real-world public health decision making, and we'll explain how training systems essentially help reinforce that ethical behavior and accountability in the federal healthcare institutions, right? So let's go ahead and dive into our next slide. So we have our ethical theories are being applied to HHS decision making. So essentially, we have, our utilitarianism, our deontology, and then our virtues, right? So for our deontology, essentially, from my understanding, it's duty-based ethics, right, and rule compliance, and also HIPAA and patient privacy protections. Just a little personal experience with the HIPAA privacy and the patient protections. I work at a community health clinic, and everything evolves around HIPAA. It is essentially crucial. And then we have our utilitarianism. So that focuses on maximizing public health outcomes, right? So and it being used in vaccine distribution and in crisis response, right? So we can do our most recent COVID pandemic. And then we have our virtual ethics, right? So being able to emphasize integrity and professional character while building trust in public institutions. So these three theories explain kind of, the different ways decisions are being made, right? The way they're being implemented in the HHS. So and meanwhile, deontology focuses on following the rules and legal responses, especially when outcomes are difficult. And our utilitarianism prioritizes the greatest good for the greatest number, which is often seen in public health emergencies. And our virtual ethics, focuses on moral character of public leadership and employees, which is essential for maintaining public trust in healthcare systems, right? Um, so then we have our ethical decisions and compliance framework. So we have our REST for component model, and then our compliance theory, right? So you know, essentially for our REST for component model. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling my words. It's that moral awareness. The moral intent and action and the judgment. And compliance theory is it's the external enforcements, the laws, the regulations, penal codes, and then also our internal culture, our accountability systems, our ethical norms, and so essentially this slide kind of explains how our ethical decisions are actually made in practice. REST's models show us that the ethical behavior is a process. It's not just a single action. It involves recognizing an issue, being able to evaluate it, and hmm, excuse me, and decide what is right, and then acting accordingly. And the compliance theory adds another layer, essentially, by showing us that behavior is shaped by external rules and internal organizational culture. In HHS, both elements are crucial and essential for ensuring accountability. And in any line of work, if you work in code enforcement, if you're in law enforcement, in the healthcare, such as myself, we really understand the importance of all of this framework, right? Um, so then we have our ethics, our compliance, and value-based training. So we have our purpose of training, our training components, and our theoretical link. So essentially, our value-based training is kind of how ethical principles become part of our daily work behavior. Instead of only teaching and instead of only teaching rules, the HHS training programs they're aimed to kind of help shape how employees think and then respond in real situations, right? Because what we learn in a video during orientation could be a little different than what we learn in person, right? Those emotions, those that that real world encounter, right? So essentially that includes ethical case studies, the cultural awareness training and compliance education. From a theoretical perspective, this essentially really helps connect strongly to virtue ethics because it builds professional character, and to behavioral learning, theory because repetition helps reinforce ethical habits over time. So for our purpose of training, we all know that, that's essentially to align employee behavior with our ethical standards and to help strengthen accountability and decision making for when our employees or when our team members do encounter those real world situations and just day to day encounters, right? So in our training components, it's essentially case based ethical scenarios, right? They're gonna give us different scenarios of what you may encounter, and our cultural competency and equity training, and our compliance and regulatory education. So that aligns with our training components, and our theoretical link kind of reinforces virtue ethics, right? Our character development, and then also supports behavior learning theory. So learning through repetition, and then ultimately we have our conclusion and policy significance. So you know in the end, HHS decision making is influenced by a combination of ethical theories, of compliance systems, and training programs. Uh, while laws and regulations ensure that basic accountability, uh, we have that ethical framework and the value-based training to help ensure that our employees are making, responsible decisions while navigating through these complex situations, and overall integrating those ethics with compliance and training essentially strengthens public trust and improves the effectiveness of healthcare delivery. So some of our key findings, is ethics in HHS is shaped by multiple ethic frameworks, and the importance, it helps us strengthen public trust and improves that healthcare equity and accountability. So I do thank you all for listening, and I know I went longer than other videos, but it takes me a little time to break this down and not rely on notes. So thank you.